But we begin tonight with a word you all need to get real familiar with. Tariffs. Now just hold a beat before you change the channel. Let me explain what they are and what this will mean for you and your pocketbook. Okay. Tariffs are taxes imposed on foreign-made goods as a way to discourage consumption of those goods and to encourage American-made versions instead. The tariff or tax is paid by the U.S. business that does the importing at the time the foreign goods come into the country, basically a border tax. And much of the time, the extra cost gets passed on to the consumer. So just to make a simple sort of mathy example, okay? Say a T-shirt company used to import shirts from China for $20 and mark them up to $30 in order to sell them to consumers, to you. And a $5 tariff is slapped on. The T-shirt company will mark the finished shirt up from $30 to $35 to cover the cost of the tariff. So suddenly T-shirts cost more at Macy's or Walmart or whatever. Hope that makes sense. Well, last night, Donald Trump posted on his social media thing that he would be signing an executive order as soon as he sits down in the Oval Office on January 20th at noon that would issue a flat 25% tariff on any items imported from from Canada, China, and Mexico. From Canada and Mexico, just Canada and Mexico. And a 10% Trump tax on goods imported from China. All three of those countries are our largest trading partners, and we ship a lot of stuff back and forth. So imagine what's going to happen when you target the countries you do the most business with. Trump's his tariff tax plans are no secret. He talked about them all throughout the campaign, but apparently people weren't paying much attention. After the election, people started to ask questions about his plans. Google searches for the term tariff spiked more than 1,600%. Searches for who pays the tariffs rose 350%. Nothing like doing your homework after the test, am I right? But okay, now we get to see who pays for tariffs. Let me give you the big picture. According to some estimates, the average American household is going to spend an additional $2,600 or more a year. I thought America didn't like the high cost of eggs. $2,600 in extra cost for stuff that you buy is like a whole lot of expensive eggs. But enough about that. Let's get down to brass tacks. Mexico is America's #1 trading partner. That means we sell each other lots and lots of stuff. They sell us cars, components for cars, crude oil, beer, lots of fruits and vegetables, including the famous avocados from Mexico. With 25% tariffs, experts estimate that we can expect to pay up to 75 cents more for a gallon of gas. We could pay at least 25 cents more for avocados, and we could pay 33 cents more for a Corona or Pacifico Cerveza. Now, let's move to our friendly neighbors to the north, who probably won't be so friendly if those tariffs go into effect. We also buy lots of oil and stuff like lumber and plastics from Canada. So again, you're going to pay more at the pump, and you're going to pay more to build your house that needs lumber. And finally, let's talk about China. They sell us all the stuff that we rely on for our everyday lives, like your smartphone, your computer, the toys your kids play with, and the cheap clothes you buy on Amazon. This time next year, you're probably going to pay a lot more for your Christmas gifts if those tariffs are still in place. Now, a big part of Trump's selling point on the tariffs was that these inflationary tactics would force American companies to make more stuff here in America. But that's kind of a pipe dream. Take, for example, the CEO of Stanley Black & Decker, the tool company. He told shareholders that he had explored shifting production from China, but it was unlikely because it's not cost effective, likely due to the high cost of American labor and high real estate prices to build a manufacturing plant and other stuff like that. And how are we going to lower costs for fruits and vegetables and construction prices when much of the labor in those industries will have been forcefully locked up and deported? You know what economists say will probably happen? The policy would probably cause prices to nearly double. So, welcome to MAGA consequences, America. Joining me now is Robert Reich, who served as labor secretary in the Clinton administration, and Ron Insana, CNBC senior analyst and CEO of iFi.ai. Robert Reich, let me ask you first. You will be my professor in this and ask, did I get anything wrong in the explanation of tariffs? And if so, please correct me.
I don't think you did, Joy, except that $2,600 per family estimate was made in August before we knew how large many of the tariffs were going to be. I think the actual per family estimated cost is probably closer now to $4,000.
So let's go into, I just want to put this up again, because I think in theory, I can understand how people who don't pay attention, who are not you or Ron and Sana and experts and who just don't pay attention to these kinds of economic ideas might think, well, that sounds good. We want to build more in America. But I want to put back up once again who our biggest trading partners are, meaning who do we import and export the most stuff from? Mexico, China, Canada, Germany, Japan, and then who we export to: Canada, Mexico, China, Netherlands, and Japan. If we slap a massive tariff, Robert, on those countries, what will they do? What might they do in return?
Well, they will do exactly what countries did in 1930. 1930 was the last time we had a big across-the-board tariff increase, and that was from Herbert Hoover. You remember President Herbert Hoover? And also Congressman Smoot and Hawley. That resulted in retaliatory tariffs by other countries retaliating against us for putting tariffs against their goods. And those retaliations, those tariff wars, ended up worsening the Great Depression.
Right. So, Ron and Sana, it's good to see you again. It's been too long. Let's talk about what business leaders are saying, because we know we've seen in California a lot of big farm, businesses who really were very supportive of Trump going, whoa, don't deport my workers. Hold on. You didn't mean my workers, right? So they're already starting to worry about some of the inflationary costs of mass deportation. But what about the tariffs? Are CEOs preparing for the tariffs, and what do they intend to do vis-a-vis prices if those tariffs get slapped on?
Well, they're doing two things already, Joy. Number one, they're already beginning to stockpile goods in anticipation of tariffs being placed on those imported goods January 20th. And they're already planning to raise prices on those very same goods to offset the tariffs once indeed they're enacted. Now, there was some hope on Wall Street that the Treasury Secretary designee, Scott Bessent, a hedge fund manager, would maybe appeal to President Trump's better angels. And so we saw a stock market rally after the appointment the individual was identified. And I think that might have been a bit premature. I wrote about that today on CNBC.com, is that they're cheering this nomination, and yet President Trump came out last night and basically said, effectively, if you will, reading between the lines, nobody's going to tell me what to do. We're going to go ahead with these tariffs, irrespective of what my cabinet thinks. He didn't talk to Marco Rubio about it, didn't talk to Scott Bessent about it. And as Bob was saying, the retaliatory issue becomes extremely important insofar as the United States under Donald Trump renegotiated NAFTA, and imposing these tariffs would violate the very treaty that he and his administration wrote the first time around. And so you would expect both Canada and Mexico to retaliate in kind.
So let me read a little bit from your piece. And this is from CNN. This is a piece from CNN. During a radio interview Saturday with Larry Kudlow, Bessent, who you mentioned, who's going to be the new guy that everybody's sort of cheering, thinking to be okay, Bessent said tariffs cannot be inflationary, because if the price of one thing goes up, unless you give people more money, then they have less money to spend on the other things, so there is no inflation. That doesn't make sense to me. Ron, what does he mean? What is he saying?
I'm not quite sure. And he said a couple of things over the last several days, that you escalate trade wars so that you can de-escalate later. And there's a certain kind of carrot and stick approach to all of this. I'm not sure what that means. Now, in the 1930s, which Bob referenced, we did not get inflation from the tariffs because we were in a deflationary depression where the economy was sinking, prices were falling through the floor. But it did worsen and exacerbate, the downside of the depression. I don't know what Scott Bessent is saying there. As we understand it right now, given current conditions, the strength of the U.S. economy, inflation may already be on the upturn to a certain extent in certain parts of our certain sectors of the economy. By adding those tariffs, you would raise the price level at least one time, and you would raise the overall level of inflation. The same thing that people are complaining about that occurred after the pandemic, that big pop in prices that we got that won't come back down. It would just exacerbate the trend that they presumably voted for Donald Trump to correct.
There's polling, right, and Robert, there's polling that says that people's number one goal, what they want Donald Trump to focus on, is lowering prices. But he's not even going to lower the price of his own special guitars. So Gibson, the company that makes like cool guitars, they're like filed legal action because he's created his own version of a Gibson guitar and he signed them, and they're like $10,000 for the most expensive one. Here's the fun thing. There aren't also made in the United States, but have been manufactured by multiple providers that include parts and features that are both domestic and international, going against Trump's America First philosophy. But that also means that even his guitars, Robert, are going to cost you more. So your $10,000 guitar will be like $11,000. So even his own projects, all his stuff he makes, his ties, all that stuff, a lot of them are made in China.
Well, it's interesting, Joy. We don't realize how much of what we buy, even things that are labeled made in America, actually come from parts that are coming from all over the world. Now, if you add in the extra costs of these tariffs to the costs that come from deporting 11 million people who we rely on to help us keep costs down and make a lot of stuff, we're talking about very, very large expenditures for the typical American family. This is crazy economics.